What's going on, ParaTruthers? Welcome to a brand new episode of ParaTruth Reborn. This is a pre recorded show on 107.7 FM New Orleans, 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast, and United Public Radio Network. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric. And in today's episode, we will be discussing the ever mysterious witch bottle. We'll begin with a brief overview of the bottle's origin and the materials used in crafting witch bottles. Then, we'll share the backstory and historical significance of a bottle's use, dive into some case studies and anecdotes, and finally, round out the topic with precautions that you should take if crafting a witch bottle of your own.
Now, what is a witch bottle? Because apparently I didn't know this before. I never heard the term witch bottle. So witch bottles have a rich historical significance in folk magic, primarily as protective charms. We've talked about this quite a bit over the past couple of weeks. And it originated, of course, in Europe. That's kind of where a lot of stuff originates for our culture today, because that's where most of us came from, particularly in England during the 16th and 17th centuries. And these artifacts were crafted to ward off malevolent forces, curses, and negative energies. Here are some key points about their historical significance. Witch bottles are believed to date back to the era when belief in witchcraft and folk magic was most prevalent, which in this case was the 16th and 17th century. During this time, which was known as the witch craze or the Great Hunt, because that's kind of when witch hunts started, a time of not only witchcraft, but fear of witchcraft was at its peak. An estimated 40 to 60,000 people were executed across Europe during this time as supposed witches. Now, the witch bottle itself served as a means for individuals to protect themselves from harm, often against perceived witches or ill wishers, and therefore were actually used by non-practitioners to ward off witches and even evil intent from said witches. Just coming off the top of my head, seems kind of ironic that you would be using a magic spell, basically.
Right. I mean, everyone should have been executed at that point. Like, it's crazy. When I saw that for the first time in the research, I was just like, wait a minute. Non-witches are protecting themselves from witches by using witch bottles, which is just a type of witchcraft. What is happening?
Well, I mean, most healers back in the day too
Right.
were basically witches because they were not educated doctors, because back then it wasn't as prevalent as it was today. So they would have been considered witches as well.
Right. And I think at the time, really the biggest was separated, or at least what people back then thought separated them from quote unquote witches, was that the idea of the witch bottle was more of a superstition rather than a quote unquote craft. Now, mind you, there is no line here. Like, they in this case, it's one of the same thing. You're using various herbs and materials to create something as an intention, right? As witchcraft typically is. Now, back then, of course, they thought a lot of the powers of witches came from the devil or dark entities, and so they kind of separated that way, saying, "Oh, witches are and witchcraft is of the devil," whereas these superstitions and the things that we make are not. Which today we see the irony, obviously, very different back then.
Right. Now, traditionally, witch bottles were created using glass containers, obviously, filled with various materials believed to hold magical properties. Common ingredients included herbs, pins, nails, urine, apparently, and other items symbolizing the intent of the witch bottle. As such, the materials used in witch bottles weren't simply thrown together, but each item held a specific and mindful purpose. We will have a more detailed look at the materials used later in the episode. But again, as much as we're saying, the intent was different. it's still like just reading those ingredients, like
Right.
nails, urine, like ah. And now I understand why people have been scared of them if they found them later on in life. Like in this day and age, if you found a witch bottle, you would think, "What is going on? House cursed."
Right. Before we go on real quick here and way off subject, something might have just happened to your mic because you got really, I heard a loud pop and then everything went really low on your end.
Okay, is that better?
That's much better.
Okay. Many witch bottles were buried near the entrance of homes or in the ground to create a barrier against negative influences. Other places include the chimney, attic, walls, and even in windowsills. This practice was thought to trap harmful entities and prevent them from entering a space.
Mm-hmm. And it's very similar to, I mean, there's so many different superstitions that we use today for the same thing. Devil's shoestring, often placed above windows or doors uh, in order to keep the devil out, to trip him up, basically, as he tries to come into your house. Same with salt. We all know the properties of salt and how it has been used, and I'm sure plenty of you currently use it around your home or in your own witch bottles or various crafts to help protect your house and keep it safe, especially from dark entities, but just from spirits in general in many cases.
For sure.
Now, one thing that is really interesting about witch bottles is that it wasn't very uniform and was actually varied by region. So, for instance, in some cultures, they functioned as love spells, while in others, they were strictly protective. Now, this ability or adaptability showcased the local beliefs and magical practices of different communities, and you would find that based on the region you're in. Another thing to add to this is that in addition to the protection and love idea of these spells, witch bottles also served purposes related to healing and well being. They were sometimes used in conjunction with folk remedies, often playing a dual role both in magical and medicinal context. And of course, speaking of context, as stated earlier, the historical backdrop of witch hunts and trials significantly impact the creation of witch bottles. Individuals sought ways to safeguard themselves during a period marked by fear and suspicion regarding witchcraft. However, as the witch hunts began to die off in Western Europe during the 18th century due to increased skepticism, Enlightenment ideals, and the reformation of legal codes, so too did the use of witch bottles. But, of course, there's always a but. In recent times, there has been a resurgence of interest in witch bottles, primarily within modern witchcraft and pagan practices. And of course, we see this. Any of us probably listening to this podcast, or Justin and I see it regularly on TikTok, especially various ways of creating your own witch bottles or any sort of other magical items to use on your day-to-day practice. Now, witch bottles in particular are celebrated not only for their historical backgrounds, but also for their enduring relevance as symbols of personal empowerment and intuition. In fact, witch bottles can be easily purchased from a local metaphysical shop or even made at home for a specific purpose. Now, often these bottles can be found hanging from rearview mirrors in cars or attached to an individual's keychain. Of course, those aren't the only places they could be kept, and you'll see a little later in this episode where we'll talk about a few other options of placing witches bottles or where they've been found throughout history and archaeological dig sites. Now, Justin had gone over a little bit. We both went over a little bit of the purpose and functions of these witch bottles, but I wanted to kind of elaborate just a little bit more. Nothing crazy here. First and foremost, as already stated, their real primary purpose when they were first really used, especially in the 16th and 17th century, was for protection and warding off negative energies, especially those associated with witches or witchcraft. Though, as I just said, it isn't really much the case in modern days. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people really get confused, or at least they misunderstand. You hear the word witch's bottle, you think it's a bottle made by witches, which today, yes, by witches, pagans, by a number of different individuals, even Christians out there do make these as well nowadays. But in the 16th and 17th century, it was primarily people who were scared of witches and witchcraft who created them for their own protection. Another thing that they're often used for is love and attraction spells. Now, love, I think, is more or less pretty descriptive in and of itself, but what are attraction spells? Well, this could be really to attract anything to you: a job, money, love, friends, etc. Witches' bottles were also used in healing and health benefits. You can consider a witch doctor in this case, or really any person who wants to either trying to heal themselves or somebody else, or use it as some sort of health benefit, like maybe getting better rest at night, for example. Finally, the witch bottle is a strong representation of intentions in magical practices. And again, we've talked about intentions a lot on this show, especially over the last 6 months or so. And that's really what these bottles are designed for. They're designed to basically instill an intention within them and then hold that intention for you as a physical manifestation or place where you can see it and remember your intentions.
And that's I think that is the idea behind any magical tool that people use today or even back in the day. It wasn't so much that you're putting in your intention into it, which you are, but it's to remind you of the intention so that you keep that intention fresh in your mind and keep it going throughout however long you want that spell to go or that protection to happen.
Right. It's the same thing when you do burning paper intentions or spells.
Right.
You write an intention on a sheet of paper, you burn it, and you let it off into the air. You let the wind take it. It's a physical representation of you letting go of that intention and putting it out there in the universe. One thing I do want to state here, because this is something I've actually have thought about a lot and actually have struggled with. So I'm going to open up a little bit here. As somebody who has obsessive compulsive disorder, often having negative thoughts, I've had this concern based on the idea of intention that if I have a negative thought while doing something that promotes some sort of energy, let's, for example, talk about string tying or rope tying, right? Not tying, I guess would be the proper term. I have had negative thoughts while tying my shoes. And in particular, once I pull that knot tight, that negative thought pops in. And I think, oh my God, did I just put an intention out there that I don't want out there? And it's something I live with daily of fear with. But through studies, something that you have to really understand is simply having a thought isn't an intention. You have to have the intention is basically something that you're committing your energy, your fullness of your mind. You are like so like accepting of the intention that the intention itself is an extension of you. So you can't simply just have a thought and then boom, it's going to happen as an intention, whether negative or positive. There's way more that goes into it, and there's much more concentration when it comes to actually putting intentions out into the universe.
For your case, though, and a lot of people with severe OCD, it can become an intention because you start obsessing on that thought.
Well, and thank you for helping me feel better. Jeez,
I'm not. No, reason I bring it up is because we've said it before. Just because you have that thought, it doesn't become true, like you said. But with obsessive compulsive people, it can. It's just you have to find a way to trigger your mind to think about something else so that you're not just obsessing on that one thought constantly. Right. And which is where a lot of the behaviors come from, which you and I have talked about it numerous times, especially the ones that you have done in the past. You've gotten a lot better over time, though, with your behaviors as far as trying
Compulsions.
to get them to not come true. So it's a hard thing to realize. I mean, I'm one of those people too that even though I don't have severe OCD, I worry that thinking about stuff constantly is going to make stuff happen, and it will if you don't stop that thought process. And so the love and attraction spells, the healing and health benefits, and the intention in magical practices, are those all from today or back when witch bottles were still or first being practiced? Did you find
Both.
both?
Both, yeah. Now, back when, back in the 16th, 17th century, it really depended on region. So all of this did exist, the love and attraction, the healing, health benefits, etc. But the primary use throughout the 16th and 17th century was for protection due to the fear that was instilled in people during the quote unquote witch craze.
Still sounds like practicing witchcraft to fight witchcraft to me.
A fire with fire, I guess.
But my point being, I have nothing against Christianity, but to see that and then think of the hypocrisy that has happened in Christianity because of things like that specifically.
Oh, yeah.
It just makes me laugh because it's like, okay, Christians are against this stuff, but then we were using it in an attempt to stop things. It's one of those things that I can go down a rabbit hole for hours on end about it, but we'll keep going here. So witch bottles were crafted using a variety of materials, each believed to hold specific magical properties. Here are some common ingredients typically used in their creation. Glass bottle, obviously, it's a bottle. In today's day and age, I mean, bottles are made of different materials, but it was always glass back in the 16th and 17th century. Primary container, usually made of glass, symbolizing transparency and the encapsulation of energies. Say that 5 times fast. Urine, often used as personal fluid, believed to connect to the bottle to the person that's it's made for. It was thought to absorb negative energies directed at them. Nails and pins. This is actually something you see throughout a lot of different magical practices: voodoo dolls, juju bags, witch bottles, other practices by pagans or witch Wiccans, stuff like that. A lot of times you're always using nails or pins.
I mean, even as far as Christianity, when you consider the nails of Christ.
True, right. These sharp objects were included to symbolize protection and the thwarting of harmful intentions. They were often inserted point first to invoke a barrier against negativity. I will bring up that most nails and pins were made of iron, and steel is a type of iron, cold iron. And there is a lot of belief that iron stops negative spells or negative energies, or energies altogether, depending on
which you would think that if that were true, though, then no person whatsoever could ever be possessed, since iron is rich typically within our blood.
You would think, and there would be those that would say, and I'm not saying this is what I believe, but there are those that would say that possession isn't a real thing. So I guess it depends on your beliefs. I don't know. And I guess, usually when you're talking about iron, you're talking about an iron object. Yeah, not your blood. So that is an interesting thought for sure. Now, some other ones are herbs. Various herbs, each with its own magical properties, can also be added. Common examples include rosemary for protection and cleansing, garlic to ward off evil spirits, and thyme for courage and strength. Salt is a very common ingredient used in witch bottles, as it acts as a purifying agent believed to absorb negative energies and provide protection against harmful influences. So in this day and age, we should all be protected against anything, because
the amount of salt and
from a
iron.
Sicilian family, we had salt, garlic, thyme, and rosemary in most of our food growing up. And even today, if you eat pizza, if you cook for yourself, those are common herbs that you use in cooking. So just a random thought I had. So there's some others here. Hair clippings, personal items like hair or nail clippings connected the bottle to the individual, enhancing its potency in protecting the person. Again, you see that in the use of voodoo dolls at times, at least in pop culture. I don't know if it's as much in the real voodoo practice. Cider vinegar or other liquids, such as olive oil, moon water, salt water, etc., are used for their cleansing properties. These liquids could symbolize the removal of negativity or the enhancement of protective energies. Small charms or tokens. We've talked about this in the past couple weeks with the haunted dolls. Some people, the reason they would have been haunted was people were kind of making them more puppets than the dolls actually becoming haunted. But you do see that a negative entity can get attached to a puppet as well. So items such as coins, stones, or other symbolic objects that carried personal or cultural significance or are often used to represent the intentions behind the witch bottle. Candles, sometimes included to symbolize light and banishment of darkness, enhancing the overall protective energy of the bottle. But depending on the intention set on the witch bottle, candles or the wax thereof can also be used in accordance to color theory and the meaning behind various colored candles. For example, a red candle may be used to promote passion or love, while a green candle may be used to promote financial lucrativity. And again, you see this throughout any magical objects. I think in the voodoo dolls that we bought in New Orleans, they were kind of the same thing as well, where the color kind of represented that, right?
Yeah. At least in our case, yes.
Right. So these materials were often chosen based on the specific intention behind the witch bottle, whether for protection, love, or healing, making each creation unique to the individual's needs and beliefs. And again, you'll see that throughout any magical tool that you use.
Right. So how do we really know whether these witch bottles were used and what they were used for? Well, that comes down to case studies and anecdotes, primarily objects, in this case, the bottles, which are found in archaeological sites during excavations in particular. So, witch bottles have had a storied history, of course, with several notable case studies illustrating their use in folk magic for protection and other purposes. And so, right now, what I want to do is just give you guys, I think, 5 or 6, I believe, pretty prominent examples of how witch bottles were used. So the first one is the witch bottle from Staffordshire in the 18th century. It was actually discovered in 2016 in a Staffordshire well. This bottle is believed to date back to the 17th or maybe 18th century, and it contained a mix of ingredients including nails, hair, and a possible representation of the witch's image. Archaeologists suggested it was intentionally placed for protection against witchcraft, reflecting the widespread fear of witchcraft during that period. Now, of course, you can question why, if it was intentionally placed, why place it in a well in particular? And I should think there's a number of different possibilities. The first is maybe they thought at the time witches were coming up from wells. maybe because they were coming from hell or something like that, or the demons or, dark entities that supplied their powers. Or even and more likely is it was their way of trying to protect the water from becoming cursed by a rather upset witch who was trying to harm them.
Another part too is back then it was believed that witches used dowsing,
Hmm.
and that's a way to find water. So maybe it was a way to protect the well from witches finding it.
That's also possible. Um, the witch bottle of 1660 is the second one on the list here. And it was a witch bottle found in the 20th century excavation in London, which contained iron nails and shreds of pottery that was associated with the witch hunts of the 17th century, and it was thought to have been used by someone seeking to protect themselves from a perceived witch's curse or harm. Again, this is something that's often used, much like the evil eye is used today. Then we have, of course, the colonial New England witch bottles, which during the 17th and 18th centuries in New England, witch bottles became very popular among the colonists. We all know who we're talking about when we say New England colonists.
Yeah.
So, for example, and for those of you who don't know, a very notable case involved a bottle found in Salem, Massachusetts, where it reportedly contained human hair and pins. And of course, based on, or according to the archaeologists, this reflects the socio-political context of the Salem witch trials during that time, emphasizing the use of witch bottles as a form of community protection against accusations and curses. So these are, of course, people who are not only trying to protect themselves from the witches themselves and the witchcraft, but they're trying to protect themselves from being accused by their friends and family and neighbors. This one's a little weird. That's the mole's eye witch bottle. Now, I say weird because we're talking about mole's eye here, but when you consider the various aspects of protection that people used in the 16th, 17th, and even 18th centuries, animals are actually very prominent. In fact, there was even a house, I believe it was, I want to say it was in London. There's been a couple houses, but primarily in London. I remember one story in which a house that was being excavated, they found a mummified cat and a mummified rat or mouse in the wall of a house. Now, some might think, well, they both just died there and that was that. But during the time in which this house was built, one protective idea was to take a dead cat and a dead mouse, put them in the walls as if the one is chasing the other, and it was to protect the house from rodents. It was supposed to ward rodents off somehow, some way. And we see this time and time again with not just cats and rodents, but a number of different creatures that were used, especially in the 16th and 17th centuries. Now, the mole's eye witch bottle was actually discovered during an excavation at a medieval site in Yorkshire, England. This bottle contained a mixture of herbs and a mole's eye. It was believed to have been used to banish illness or bad luck, showcasing the diversity of purpose behind witch bottles more beyond mere protection. Then, of course, we have the witch bottle of the 19th century America. And I say America specifically because there are different contexts in which witch bottles were used. But in 19th century Appalachian communities, witch bottles were sometimes buried or hidden in homes to protect against witchcraft. Documentation actually exists of families creating these bottles filled with personal items and protective herbs, underscoring their use in rural folk traditions, and this is still very well used today in the Appalachian communities. Then, of course, finally, we have the English witch bottles, which is the local context in this case. Again, different regions in England had unique practices surrounding witch bottles as well. In some areas, they were buried backward at doorways, while in others, they were hidden within home structures. Local reports from various centuries describe personal experiences where families use these bottles to ward off ill wishes or spiritual attacks, often reflecting the community's shared beliefs and fear. So, again, depending on where you were going in England, what region, what location, you would start to see how these witch bottles would kind of transform one from one place to the next in terms of their use.
I didn't realize there had been that many excavated. I'm sure there's probably been plenty more.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But so the interesting thing about all of this is that in today's day and age, a lot of practices that were kind of shunned or even banned in places back in not so late history is that we're using them today, and it's become much more an accepted part of the culture. In contemporary witchcraft, witch bottles are most commonly used as a protective charm, as a means to ward off evil intent, curses, psychic attacks, bad luck, and just about any other negative energy. However, witch bottles can also be used as a means of intent to influence things like love, wealth, healing, etc. Like we mentioned earlier, it is all about the intent. So it's interesting that it's used for both, either kind of like a magical spell or protection against something, which in a sense can be a magical spell. Um, Now, social media is also a big influence on the modern craft of witch bottles. Not only do platforms like TikTok and Instagram increase both visibility and accessibility to witch bottles, but it has also influenced the modern use of witch bottles as a device to conjure positivity rather than original use of defensive purposes. Social media has also restructured the idea of witchcraft and folk magic as a spiritual, positive, and self affirming practice. The resurgence of folk magic is also growing as and has grown over the last several years, practiced primarily by millennials and Gen Z as a desire for control and connection in an uncertain world as we face today. As such, modern practitioners often draw from witchcraft, paganism, and other forms of magic to find a personal empowerment, spiritual meaning, and as a way to connect to nature through an ever advancing technological world. Now, you would think the easiest way to connect to nature is put
Go
down
out.
your damn phone,
Yeah, go out in it.
keep it inside, and go outside.
Yeah.
But I can see how in this technological age, this is a way to take baby steps, if you will.
Well, yeah, but on top of that, especially here in America, but around the world, we're seeing more and more harm being done to fellow humans. And, I think people want to get away from, uh, the, not to say to get away from the human experience, but they want a better understanding of the human experience other than what they're just seeing on the social media, on their phones, on TV, etc. So taking the time to kind of delve into some of these things, go out in nature, be a part of it, experience it, learn the ways of old, helps connect you to your ancestors as well, who maybe did or did not experience similar things in their time. But it is a very growing, a very growing thing for a lot of millennials and Gen Zers to be doing right now. And again, you see it. I mean, TikTok is one place, sure, but YouTube, there's a ton of stuff on YouTube, especially those of you who probably know, if you know, right? WitchTube is what it's known as. And so there are plenty of people who are either advanced witches or aspiring witches who create daily YouTube videos to share their walk and explain some of the things that they've done and have learned through it. And mind you, like some of this isn't even like just a straight up practice. Like some of it is just experimentation for some people, probably for a lot of people. But yeah, it is continuously growing. And I think as the next 10, 15 years come by, it's going to continue to grow for sure.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to not just witch bottles, but really any sort of well, actually anything that's like placing intentions out there, whether it be a craft of some sort, a spell, perhaps even prayers, depending on all of this, depending on certain situations, you have to really consider the ethical considerations behind it. So when it comes to reasonable practices in magic, in this case, it's important to follow certain things. And this is something that should be on all of our minds in general, primarily when we even open our mouths to speak or before we decide to do anything in action, right? The first and foremost is to prioritize consent and autonomy. You want to avoid performing spells on or for others without their explicit informed consent. And practitioners, today, many practitioners believe that attempting to manipulate someone's free will, even with good intentions, is unethical and can backfire. Now, we've met quite a few individuals throughout the years who are practitioners of witchcraft and various other crafts. And some of them will agree on this, and others not at all. So, you kind of leave that up to you to discern, I suppose. But yeah,
Well,
that is
there's that saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
right. Right. That is something to consider. Like for me, it's always like if you have an idea, if you have a thought, think twice about it. Doesn't mean it's wrong.
Right.
Doesn't necessarily mean it's the right idea either, right?
Right.
So you just got to just tread carefully especially when it comes to this stuff, because you'll hear a number of practitioners out there that say that once you put an intention out there, like it's not easy to wrangle back, if
Right.
at all. So,
Right.
And that kind of brings us to actually two more points here in particular. But the first is do no harm. The principle, and ye harm no one, do, or I'm sorry, ye harm none, do what ye will, is some of the older way of saying it. Basically, do no harm. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in some trouble. It's a core tenet, basically, for many witches in particular, especially those within the Wiccan tradition. And the broader ethical stance is to act responsibly and avoid causing intentional harm to others or yourself.
I kind of like that saying over do unto others as
Mm.
you would want done unto you, because I mean, there will be those that will go and hurt people because they want to be hurt in return. So,
Well, that's called trauma. They need to see a therapist. Uh, and then this next one is actually very prominent, I think, for a lot of us, whether you're a practitioner or not. I think this is very common, well-rounded belief among humanity, and it is simply practicing accountability. Now, it's important to take responsibility for your actions and their consequences. I know a lot of you don't, and I would be lying if I said I wasn't one of them occasionally. But traditions incorporate the threefold law in this case, which holds that the energy you put out, positive or negative, will return to you threefold. For those of you maybe know of it by another word, it's called karma. And yeah, that's something you definitely want to consider, especially when doing any sort of spells. Finally, and this is something that you guys have also heard on many shows, I'm sure, throughout the years and multiple times on ours, respect closed practices. We've had these discussions with plenty of guests, but basically many spiritual practices such as Vodun and certain Native American traditions are culturally specific and require specific lineage or initiation. Basically, respecting these boundaries means admiring from a distance and not co-opting them into your personal practice. And of course, we've heard all kinds of different stories, especially regarding the Native American traditions. We've even had individuals on our show who said no one should ever use white sage because it's an Native American tradition.
mm-hmm.
But we've had other people come on and say otherwise, and there is a line. And in my, based on what I've learned and experienced, it is okay to use white sage so long as you're doing it in a way that doesn't neglect or undermine its original intended use through Native American traditions.
Right. Yeah. I want to say I heard that so long as you're not saying that it's smudging, because the smudging is actually the Native American practice of it. Just using the sage and, again, intent and all that stuff. It's a little bit different than Native American practices. So unless, and I would love for another Native American guest to come on and tell us otherwise, because again, I'm not wanting to do something to disrespect a culture for sure. Now, there's potential consequences of misuse, as you would always think, that should be considered. As we just talked about, there's the idea of the threefold law. And so if you plan on using witch bottles as a means to harm, then there's a chance that it would return threefold upon the practitioner. Um, Something else to consider is the impact a witch bottle or spell can have on the individual for which it is used. And again, I think that's where the consent part comes in. Have them, with you when you're having this witch bottle made for them, because they should know that you're trying to help them, and obviously give consent for that. Even if the bottle is intended for positivity, the person for whom you are trying to help may find it as an intrusion of privacy.
Right. Well, and not to mention, like, there are plenty of individuals out there who, I mean, anything that even resembles any sort of witchcraft or what have you will immediately stray away from it, even if it's considered to be or meant to be of good reasoning behind it,
Yeah, because
good
there's
intention
that
behind it.
negative
It's just that,
connotation on witch.
right, exactly. And there are some people who, like, definitely respect any individual and their practices, but they just don't want any part of it. And so that is something that we all have to consider. I've asked people if I could pray for them, and they've told me no. And I've got to respect that, because that's their wish. They don't want that. So you do have to tread things carefully here and be aware of the people that you're trying to help in any situation.
Interestingly enough, I had someone ask me that this year if they could pray for me. It was at a vendor show for Shelly. And I'm like, sure, absolutely. And he's like, well, what do you want? What do you want me to pray for? I'm like, more sales, because
Right.
it was not going well for
Yeah.
sales.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. But, and like, it even goes into, you know, like, just into something like, for example, CPR, right? So I had to take a CPR class for my personal training certificate.
Hmm.
And one thing that they mention over and over and over again during the class and during the studies is that if the person is aware at any way, like whatsoever, you cannot touch them without their explicit permission to touch them. So if someone fell down, they're hurt, and they need. This isn't just CPR, by the way. It's just any case in which you're trying to help somebody. Before you touch them, before you move them, you need to have their explicit yes to do so. The only way you can counter, or not counter, but go over that or step over that boundary is if the person is incapable of responding, meaning in this case, they are completely out, no response whatsoever. Then in that case, you take the best, your best decision. You make your best decision. Is it the right call? Is it the wrong call to perform CPR, to help this person, move them, etc.? Again, it all comes down, it's situational. But yeah, it's always important to have consent when it comes to these type of things.
Yeah. Now, it's also important to know what you're putting into these bottles and what those items are intended for. There are plenty of materials on the market for crafting witch bottles, and many of those materials are mislabeled. And I mean, depending on where you're getting them from, it may be dangerous as well because of the mislabeling,
or just not ethical if you're against that.
Right. So it's always important to do your research and know exactly what you're placing into the bottle and what it's used for. On top of that, if calling upon or conjuring spirits to help in the manifestation of your particular spell, then it is important to be aware of what spirit you were calling upon and what harm that spirit can potentially do. I would also say make sure you're protecting yourself when you're doing that, because even if you call the right spirit or whatever, an attachment can happen regardless if it's a positive or negative spirit.
Mhm.
Some spirits are misleading spirits, tricksters, and downright dark. And so treading cautiously within the spirit world is highly advised. The list of potential misuse of witch bottles or witchcraft in general is ever growing, and it is always best to do your research and know exactly what you're doing before you do it.
Yeah.
And I do want to say that today, and maybe it was just confusion back then, or just that people were scared of witchcraft, but today many witchcraft practitioners will say they never do negative spells. It doesn't matter how much they're being paid, because again, intention. And if you're intending to hurt somebody, you got that threefold law that it possibly may come back to bite you in the butt.
Right. And of course, that's not to say there aren't people out there willing to do some evil deeds. Back when I had
No.
Forgotten Truth Radio, I had somebody who was upset about what I was saying and said that he was you know a dark practitioner, and that he's going to cast a negative spell or curse upon me because of it. And there are people out there who will do that. They don't care. They think they're protected. And of course, I wasn't afraid because my Bible says that anything that is intended for harm toward me will be reversed onto them and I'll be protected. So it wasn't a big deal. But nonetheless, you have to be aware of the people you're associating yourself with and who you're working alongside. Now, it is like, thankfully, in today's age, most people are practicing positive intentions and spell works and prayers. But sadly, there are individuals walking in dark circles who do quite the opposite. So if you're someone looking for a spell to help you, or a prayer or whatever, have it, just make sure you're looking to the right people and that you trust those individuals before giving them the okay.
So kind of recapping the key points here. Witch bottles are all about intention, what you're putting into them, energy wise. I mean, what you're putting into them for the physical ingredients, and then what they're used for, and making sure you have consent from the person that it's being made for, that they're okay with you doing this, and it's okay that they're going to keep it with them and whatnot.
Okay.
Like you've said, Eric, I think that goes without saying for anything in this day and age. Make sure that you're asking for consent, and have positive intentions, just because there's way too much negativity in this world. So let's not add to it.
Right.
But we do invite you guys to share your experiences and feedback about our episodes. No matter where you listen, we're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, 107.7 FM New Orleans, 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast, and United Public Radio Network. Pretty much wherever you can find great podcasts, you can find us, and you can find us on all the social medias. The show does go out live, both on YouTube and on Facebook. We did have a poll on this. I think the only person that responded was your mom. And the question was...
He means that literally, not as, someone being a jerk.
Yeah, that wasn't an insult. And the question was, would you keep or destroy a witch bottle if you found one? The answers were keep it sealed, destroy it, open it, or call a paranormal team. And your mom responded, I'd call you two. So a paranormal team. We'll put it under that. So 100% call paranormal team. I think if I found an old witch bottle, like one that I had no clue where it came from or whatever, or if it looked really, really old, I would probably cleanse it and keep it. And I'm sure I have the sinking suspicion it's the same answer for you.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's I can't help it. I can't help it.
I love how you say that like it's a terrible thing.
I mean, well, here's the thing: like some things are just negative, right? And you shouldn't take them into your home. But I've said it multiple times. I found that African mask that I knew had a negative energy attached to it. My ex-girlfriend at the time didn't believe me until she held it, and then she agreed, and I still brought it home anyway, because no matter how much I wanted to put it down, he was like, "No, take me home." And I tell you, that stuff always does that to me. Always. I'm a sucker.
Well, and I mean, yeah, we took those nails home from Poplick Trestle as well.
Mm-hmm.
Again, maybe probably not the safest. For one, you could have ended up with or both of us could have ended up with tetanus if
They
we
are
had
very rusty.
secondly, because of what is at the Poplick Trestle, it could have been cursed, followed us home, whatever.
Yeah.
I personally didn't cleanse mine. Nothing bad has happened, thankfully. I know you cleansed yours.
I did eventually. I didn't at first, but then some things some things happened that I was not too thrilled about. And I was like, weird coincidence that this would happen right when I brought this thing into my house. So yeah, and on top of it, it probably wasn't good to take them because they may or may not have been covered with leeches, and I just brushed them off and took it home anyway. So.
Well, thanks for keeping that from me when you gave me mine. Oh man. Okay. So
and he's gonna go throw up now and throw out his nails.
No, it'll still sit there. It might not touch him very much. So, like I mentioned, like, share, subscribe. No matter where you guys listen, it does help us, but it also helps you as well. So that when that new episode comes out, you're automatically notified. Keep an eye on our social medias so that way you can get in on the conversation. I had put a post out about 3-Eye Atlas. If you don't know what that is, go ahead and Google it and check it out. It's actually an object that has entered our solar system at this point. There's been huge speculation of what it is. But we set up different polls. We put in posts about the upcoming episodes. So make sure you're paying attention, and we would love to hear from y'all. But again, this has been a pre-recorded show for 107.7 FM New Orleans, 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast, and United Public Radio Network. Check out all the great shows that we have on the network. I love that we've got such a great family on UPRN. It's been a privilege to find a network that actually works for their producers. Until next week, where you'll find us same time, same channel. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric. Peace.